Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the BPCA Digital Forum. Today is World Pest Day, so yeah, happy World Pest Day to everybody here. This day serves an opportunity to raise awareness about the vital role of professional pest management in addressing pest-related challenges and issues that we have. It showcases the dedication and expertise of pest management professionals in ensuring a safe, pest-free environment for individuals, communities and industries worldwide. And interestingly enough, it's something that's originated in 2017, and the event brings together professionals, experts and advocates in the pest management industry to highlight their critical role in safeguarding public health, something obviously BPCA are always talking about and we're very passionate about. And it's for preserving the environment, ensuring food security, a really important role that we all play. I think we'll all agree. This year, BPCA is celebrating and highlighting careers in pest management. We've released a new careers page and a series of videos starring members. Our aim is to show as many people as possible what a great sector we are and to attract a new generation as some of us are aging through. We need to attract those new young faces, really important. I was up in Scotland earlier in this year at a careers show at a university, just trying to promote the industry, and there's some really good interest there, actually a lot more than expected. So yeah, that was a really great day. And if you're celebrating World Pest Day, let us know on Facebook and Twitter, or give us an email at hello@bpca.org.uk. That'd be great. To honour this day further, we've got some excellent speakers, as well as the BPCA Member Awards. The awards celebrate positive contributions made by members of the association and the wider pest management sector. Also, for this extra special forum, I'd like to say a really extra special thank you to Killgerm Chemicals for being our sponsors. Really looking forward to hearing from Dr. Matthew Davis today. He's doing a speak after the break, talking about the public health significance of urban pests. So yeah, a big thank you to Killgerm today. Some other speakers we've got. Just to go through the agenda a little bit for you, you should have all received that there, but just as a reminder, first up we'll have Dr. Stephen Doggett from New South Wales Health Pathology talking about insecticide resistance in bed bugs. It's nearly sort of 7 p.m.-ish, I think, over there. So yeah, thank you to Stephen for joining us, and we'll catch up with him in just a moment. We also then have the bugs inside of bugs, how bacteria can influence pest management, from Laura Rosenwald. She's from the National Pest Management Association, and I believe it's maybe going to be about 4 a.m. there for her as well when she comes on. So again, another thank you for all these different time zones coming in, and again, part of celebrating the World Pest Day. Really appreciative of that. And just as mentioned before, just before the break, we've got the BPCA Member Awards. That's hosted by Martin Rose King. He's our Vice President and also Professional Standards Committee Chair. That'll take about 15-20 minutes or so, and then we'll have a break at 11 a.m. for 10 minutes, just so you can grab a coffee, stretch your legs a little bit before we return for the previously mentioned talk by Killgerm, Matthew Davis, talking about the public health significance of urban pests. Just a bit of an FYI, so we've had a slight agenda edit for later on this morning. We were supposed to have Ed Dolshan from Catchmaster, who was going to do a talk on rodent trapping. However, he can't be with us today. So a really huge thank you goes out to Richard Mosley from Syngenta for stepping in. He's going to be talking about ant control and controlling with things like gel formulations, a really important tool that we've got in the industry for those annoying little ants that we get this time of year. And then after that, you'll have me back, and I'll just do a bit of association news and updates. And then we'll finish the forum. So hopefully that's an agenda you can all look forward to. Before we do get started, just a few reminders. So we have a charity of the year, it's Mind. We've got a target of £1,000. You'll be directed towards the website after the forum today. So as usual, any contributions that you can make would be much appreciated. CPD, so we've got some CPD points today. If you've pre-registered, then you'll have those automatically uploaded onto your account, be it prompt or BPCA registered. If you do decide to watch any of these presentations later on, or you want to share them with any of your colleagues, you will, as a BPCA member, you will be able to log in and share those presentations. Just remember to log the points yourself if you do, Remember, if you're not watching it live, we don't know about it. So you can log on and update those points for you. Okay. And one final reminder, so I think a lot of you here probably been on to these sessions before and know how they work, but we have a chat section, just where there's a few people now I can see popping up saying good morning from different organisations and different places from around the UK, but you can, chat amongst yourself. If you have any technical issues as well, then that's the place to put it in there. If there's any sound issues or video issues, pop a comment in there, and I've got some colleagues in the background who better help you out. A lot of the time it might be turn it off, turn it on, but yeah, if you do have any issues, stick it in there. And then we have a Q&A section, of course, as usual, at the end of every presentation. So if you've got any specific questions for the presenter, then please make sure you put it in the Q&A section, because that's where we're going to be looking at the end of the presentation. If you get it in the chat section, we won't necessarily see it. But again, if you do put it in the chat section, I'll have a colleague that will remind you to put it in the Q&A. Okay. Good. I think everything's okay. No one's telling me that there are any sound issues. So without further ado, if I can ask Stephen, if you could put your camera on. There we go. Fabulous. And you know what? I'll let you do yourself some introductions and tell us a bit about what you're speaking about today. Thank you, Stephen.
Okay, I'll just share the screen, so bear with me for a moment. Well, I'll just get my act together. And I'll just get the right screen up. So thank you, Natalie. So my name is Stephen Doggett. I'm the Director of Medical Entomology at Westmead Hospital in Australia, and I'm here to talk about insecticide resistance in bedbugs. So I hope you're having a wonderful World Pest Day and have done something special. I let some bedbugs go in the director's office. Why not? Hey, it's World Pest Day. No, I wouldn't do that, of course. But I'd like to thank Lauren Day and the British Pest Control Association for the very kind invitation to come and speak to you today. And really, if we're talking about the pest control industry, I can't think of a better topic than bedbugs. For it was bedbugs that started this amazing industry. The very first pest control company in the world, the famous Tiffin & Son of London, was established to control bedbugs. And this was a slogan in the window: may the destroyers of peace be destroyed by us. Pretty good slogan, isn't it? Tiffin & Son, bug destroyers to Her Majesty. The company was formed in 1690, and so we can basically assume Queen Mary II had bedbugs. Was she the most famous person in history to have bedbugs? I'm sure there's been a few since, but it's not so well known and probably not so well advertised these days. But there's something really special about Tiffin & Son that I only just recently learned. But you'll have to wait to the end of the talk for that, because in the meantime, you're going to hear about resistance, insecticide resistance in bedbugs. And as an overview to this presentation, I'll start by discussing what is resistance. I'll move on to talk about the history of bedbugs, resistance in bedbugs, both from the past and in the modern context. Then I'll go on to talk about the different resistant mechanisms, and there's lots, and this is a huge science by itself. Then I'll go on to talk about what it means to you as a pest manager. And what it means for you is treatment failures. And are treatment failures common? Well, yes, they are, and that's a fact. But we want to learn how to prevent treatment failures, and I'll talk about that. Then finally, at the end of this presentation, I'll give you some sources of further information. So what exactly is insecticide resistance? Well, if you've got a population of some sort of pest, and if you treat these pests with some sort of insecticide, and they show a decreased susceptibility to the insecticide, where once it controlled it, then good chance you've got resistance. So in any population of pests, you've got some that are a bit more tolerant, are less susceptible, or even potentially resistant to an insecticide. And this, in this case, is marked by this sort of pink purpley bedbug. And if you spray this population, you're going to kill off all those susceptible bedbugs, leaving behind the more tolerant or the more resistant individuals that have a chance to reproduce, and that genetic makeup of that particular individual then becomes the dominant genetic makeup through the whole population, such that susceptible bedbugs become rare. And this is exactly what has happened with bedbugs in recent years with the global resurgence that we're still experiencing to this very day. And so the opposite of resistance is susceptible. And the other term that I need to just briefly touch on is cross-resistance. So if you have resistance developed to one class of insecticide, and if there's similar mode of actions to other classes of insecticides, then you can get cross-resistance occurring. And the most famous example of this is cross-resistance between the organochlorines, the natural pyrethrin, and pyrethroids. But it can occur with other classes as well. And we see that with bedbugs. Now, of course, an insecticide can fail for a number of reasons beyond resistance. Obviously, incorrect dilution, incorrect application rate, past expiry date, particularly important for the biopesticides. Incorrectly stored. I remember seeing a video from England of this pest controller who was keeping his insecticide in the back of the vehicle, which was freezing at night, and that can potentially denature the insecticide. In the case of bedbugs, if you don't treat every harbage where they occur, then you can fail. And it's not the insecticide failing, it's you failing. And one of the key aspects when it comes to control of modern bedbugs is training. And as I say, rubbish in, rubbish out, and there's a whole stack of terms along that line. So let's move on to the history of insecticide resistance in bedbugs. The first report of resistance occurred in the Naval Depot in Hawaii in 1947 in Cimex lectularis, the common bedbug. That's the one most predominant through the UK. I think this is quite interesting because DDT hit the market in October 1945, only 2 years previously. So it suggests, gee, resistance occurred really rapidly, or did it? Really did it? And I'm saying that for the very reason because natural pyrethrin had been on the market for well over 90 years. The very famous, probably the most famous insecticide in the world was Keating's powder. Started by Thomas Keating in London in 1790. He started with two products, insecticide powder and a throat lozenge. Both contained natural pyrethrin. But it was only from about 1860 onwards when it was really widely used. So some 90 years before the report of resistance with DDT. So it's quite possible resistance occurred years ago. But DDT was so selective in selecting those resistant individuals, it just became apparent much more rapidly. Almost 10 years later, we saw reports of DDT resistance in a tropical bedbug, Cimex lectularis, but by the late 50s, early 60s, resistance was all around the world. However, the resistance wasn't at such a great level that the organochlorines and the organophosphates didn't control all populations. And even within 10 years of the introduction of DDT, bedbugs became very rare in the developed world. And one of the consequences of that is that there was a huge decline in research, very little research done from about 1950 to around 2005. And the other consequence is that very few pest controllers had experience in controlling bedbugs. And so when we saw this creature come back, it was new to everybody. But there was the exception, and the exception was in Africa, where there was some really good research being undertaken within the KwaZulu region by a fellow called Keith Newbury. And in this region, both tropical and common bedbug occurred, and it was a malarious endemic area. And we believe a lot of resistance that occurred or developed and evolved in bedbugs wasn't direct due to direct spraying to bedbugs, it was indirect due to malaria control, where malaria spraying of chemicals on the walls inadvertently led to resistance to DDT. And even the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of bedbugs in Africa and they were highly resistant to a range of insecticides. We believe that the modern strains of bedbugs probably originated from Africa. And then in 1998, a paper basically suggested, it wasn't a scientific paper, it was a report in the medical journal called the Medical Post, suggested that perhaps bedbugs were coming back and perhaps they were resistant. Well, yes, they were. And basically wherever we look now, the bedbugs are highly resistant. And there are a number of resistant mechanisms that are being reported against a range of insect pests. Behavioral resistance, the most famous of these is glucose aversion in German cockroaches. There's cuticular resistance, metabolic resistance, target site insensitivity, often called knockdown resistance or simply KDR. There's symbiont-mediated resistance. So you're about to hear about symbionts. And in some insects, these endosymbionts, these bacteria that have evolved with the insects, which often have become very important for the insect. In the case of bedbugs, they supply vitamin B to the insect, that the presence of these bacteria confer a degree of resistance. One thing we don't know, and this has been reported in other insect groups, are these mechanisms synergistic? So instead of say 1 + 1 = 2, does 1 + 1 = 10? It's probably the case, but we don't know yet for bedbugs. We can probably assume that is the case. Now, there's no evidence for behavioral resistance in bedbugs. And symbiont-mediated resistance was only recently reported in the tropical bedbug. Hasn't been described in the common bedbug yet. So I'm not going to talk about those, but I'll focus on the other forms of resistance, which are very real and create a lot of problems for us. And we'll start by cuticular resistance. Well, think of the insect skin. In many ways, it's not dissimilar to ours in some respect. It's a penetration barrier. It keeps the bad stuff out and keeps the good stuff in. But in the case of bedbugs, they have an incredibly waxy cuticle. In fact, of all the insects on the planet, bedbugs have one of the most waxiest, and they can survive very low levels of desiccation. And of course, they're a very long-lived insect as well. What we see in this image here is that we've got a bedbug that's stuck down on some tape. It's just been sprayed with some water, and you can see how the water beads on the insect. And that's the thing with bedbugs. You can spray a bedbug with insecticide, a lot of it's just going to bounce off. But we can have mutation that leads to overexpression of genes, which lead to deposition of proteins in the cuticle that slows down the penetration of the insecticide into the insect. Up until recently, we didn't know whether the modern strains of bedbugs had thickened cuticle, and some research in our laboratory demonstrated that is the case. And I'll show you that shortly. But the outcome is reduced insecticide penetration. So less of the insecticide actually gets into the insect. Now, what I'm showing you here is some work by my former PhD student, Dr. David Lilly, who now works for Ecolab. He got one strain of bedbugs and exposed them to deltamethrin. Lambda-cyhalothrin. Deltamethrin's in the later slide. So lambda-cyhalothrin. And across the x-axis, it just records portion knockdown over time. And so what he did with these bedbugs, he collected them into 3 different groups. The first group is what he called intolerant, those that were knocked down in under 2 hours. There was those that he called tolerant, which were knocked down between 4 hours and 24 hours. And those he called resistance, that were largely still alive after 24 hours. And then what he did is he got these bed bugs, and here we can see a bed bug looking at underneath. He basically cut the leg off and then measured the thickness of the cuticle. And this is what he found, that the different categories, intolerant, tolerant, and resistance, were all statistically different in terms of their thickness, such that the most resistant individuals had a much, much thicker cuticle. And there's one really important lesson to this research, is that in any resistant strain, a small portion will be really hard to kill with insecticides. So after your initial treatment, when you come back, you've always got to do a follow-up inspection. Those that are left behind, don't expect them to be easy to kill. They're going to be the tough ones, the really tough ones. Now, if the insecticide actually makes it past the cuticle, then suddenly they can be hit with all these enzymes, these metabolic enzymes that can detoxify the insecticide. Now, there's lots of them. Broadly speaking, this includes the cytochrome P450s, the esterase, the ATP binding cassette transporters, ABC transporters, often abbreviated to. Now, I'm not going to talk about these because there's people with more experience with resistance than me. And if I started talking about the specifics of these, I'd look pretty stupid. But needless to say that each category, there's lots of forms of each. So cytochrome P450s, I think there's about 12 described, and so on. And each one confers different levels of resistance. And so what these do is either break down the insecticide or reduce the concentration so it increases the excretion of the insecticide, rendering less effective. So if the insecticide goes through the cuticle and makes it through the cuticle, passes a metabolic enzyme, then suddenly they can meet with target site insensitivity, often called knockdown resistance or simply KDR. Now, the pyrethroids act on the nervous system, and what they do is fire the nervous system, but then prevent the firing of the nervous system from switching off. So it's like switched off, on, travels along the nerve, it's like a sigmoidal fashion, but as it passes through the nerve, it's then switched off. And it prevents the nerve from being switched off. So they block what's called the voltage-gated sodium channel. By blocking that, the nerve keeps firing, and you end up with this hyperexcitation, paralysis, and eventually death. Now, KDR is a major resistant mechanism. There's lots of them. There's something like 12 described for the tropical bedbug, and some of these are known to cause super resistance even. But what happens is that we can have point mutations on the VGS-C gene, such that the insecticide can't bind at the target site. And this form of resistance is very relevant to the pyrethrin, to the pyrethroids and the organochlorine, a very important form of insecticide resistance that occurs across many classes of insects. And so in terms of these resistant mechanisms, they confer resistance to different classes of insecticide. We've got cuticular resistance that confers resistance just about to everything, and even reduce susceptibility to the desiccant dust, such as silica dioxide and diatomaceous earth. Metabolic resistance confers resistance to a range of classes, including the aryl pyrols, neonicotinoids, and target site insensitivity, largely to the organochlorines and the pyrethroids. But there are forms that can confer resistance to organophosphates as well. And one of the problems is that in each of these different forms of resistance, there's many types, that there's many combinations and different permutation, which adds up to different levels of resistance, as you'll see shortly. Now, there's a caveat in this presentation at this point when I'm talking about resistance, and that is formulation. Now, what we've got here is the result of some efficacy testing of deltamethrin. So Sizzlin, I believe you've got that in the UK. So in Australia, the label has two directions. It has an initial rate, as marked by the dark blue, and it has a maintenance rate, indicated by the light blue or the aqua. And the pink is the control. So we spray bed bugs with a modern strain of bed bugs with deltamethrin at the label rate and monitor mortality over time. So you can see with this liquid formulation, even after 10 days, we're only getting about 40% control. However, let's change the formulation to an aerosol, to deltamethrin aerosol, and all the bed bugs are dead within 2 hours. And we think two things are working: that the solvents in the aerosol are helping to overcome the cuticular resistance to allow the insecticide to penetrate into the insect, and the piperonal butoxide, the synergist, is then switching off some of the enzymatic resistance. However, if you spray a surface and let that deltamethrin dry, the aerosol dry, it simply just doesn't work. In fact, it's worse than the liquid formulation. So formulation is very important. And before I mentioned, there's all these different forms of resistance, and there's different combinations, different permutations, and end up adding up to different levels of resistance. And so the question is there evidence of resistance varying between strains of bedbugs? Well, yes, there is. And going back to David Lilly, as part of his PhD, he collected bedbugs across Australia, and across the bottom of the axis, all these initials refer to location. So if you look at the first one, North B stands for Northbridge. It's a suburb in Sydney. And so what he did was he got deltamethrin at 10 times the label rate and just put 1 drop, so 1 microliter, onto the bed bugs and recorded mortality. And so we've got percentage mortality from 0 to 100%. Now, you go in the field and you take deltamethrin and spray bed bugs. I hope you don't, but you go out and spray, and it just happens that the strain you spray's got this resistance profile. And you pretty much kill them all, and you think, oh yeah, too easy, done well, pat on the back. You go out the next day with the same chemical and you get no control. And you think, God, it worked yesterday, what did I do? It's the same insecticide as yesterday, can't be a bad batch. Oh, did I mix it up wrong? No, It's just a reflection of this variable level of resistance we see in the field. It's hugely variable. And so what does all this resistance mean for the professional pest manager? Treatment failure and treatment failure. And this is a slide I tend to use a lot, but I think it's very important. And it demonstrates what can happen and what can go wrong when treatment failures occur in a multi-unit apartment complex. Now, what we've got here is an apartment complex attached to a major hospital in Sydney. This is a diagrammatic representation. There's 10 floors of accommodation. Ground floor was administration. So 10 floors, 32 rooms per floor. And bed bugs were first detected in room 615 in May 2003, as indicated by the red. It was treated. The room was treated, but treated very badly. The outcome of bad treatment in apartment complexes, the infestation spreads. And so this tracks the infestation over time. And we'll just continue, oops, sorry. And we'll continue on with this slide. And suddenly we see an infestation in another part of the building. Was this a new introduction or an internal transfer? Perhaps the doctors and nurses were playing doctors or nurses. Hey, it happens. And we'll continue on tracking this infestation over time. And eventually we get to May 2005. And by this time, 10% of rooms showed evidence of bedbug infestations. And at this point, the management of the facility thought, oh God, something's not working. Well, yeah. So they sacked the original pest controller, brought in a company, Eagle Pest Control, they don't exist anymore, who were extremely competent at bedbug control. And a very smart decision was made. And the smart decision was to inspect every single room. And this is what was found. Another 10% of rooms were found infested. And there are a lot of lessons to be learned from this example. So one, always inspect adjoining rooms in apartment complex, side to side, above and below, even in horizontal. I like to ask the question, what would have happened if not all rooms were inspected? Well, it could be that this infestation could be going to this very day. And in the US, there are apartment complexes where literally 100% of rooms have become infested. 100% of units. I also like to ask the question, just how many times do you think bed bugs were introduced into this facility? And I say once. And the reason why I say once is because despite bed bugs being at record levels in the community, we've never seen bed bugs in this facility again. And in fact, a colleague of mine, Warren Booth, who's from Ireland, now works in the US, he did something really smart. I think it's one of the most important papers in the history of bedbug research in the modern times. He collected bedbugs over these chronically infested buildings where there's 100% of the rooms were infested. And he did fancy molecular work and showed that all these bedbugs were highly related. How related? Well, his research suggests that all these bedbugs originated from one single female. And so one of the consequences of this bad pest control was a major cost blowout. What should have cost $400 for room 615 in May 2003 cost over $40,000. And I'd have to ask you, why shouldn't that pest control pay for it? Now, that's my opinion or my suggestion. If it came to a courtroom, we know the outcome. The pest controller would be a lot poorer. But this also explains why the bedbug resurgence occurred so rapidly. And we can say that the degree of the bedbug resurgence was due to poor pest control. The trigger was insecticide resistance, but the rapid nature of the resurgence was due to poor pest control. And you're all probably thinking you're doing a great job, and I'm sure you all are. Well, most of you. But are pest control treatment failures against modern strains of bedbugs common? Well, let's move to the literature. Mike Potter, a very famous figure in the US, recently retired. In a paper in 2008, he showed that pest controllers on average failed 20% of the time. Chandler Wayne from Rutgers University in the US showed that pest controllers on average failed 50% of the time. He then went on to evaluate 3 different control strategies. I won't go into all of them, but after 10 weeks, he reported failures of up to almost 70%. Another colleague of his, Singh, reported almost a similar failure rate. And a good colleague of mine, Espen Roe from Norway, who's responsible for a very large portfolio of low-income housing in Norway. He basically says pest controllers pretty much fail 50% of the time. However, there's this huge disjunct between observation of reality and perception, because most pest controllers say they're successful 90% of the time. And this is a real problem. And in fact, control failures are extremely common, and you should plan to fail. By planning to fail, you're preparing not to. And so how can we prevent control failures? Well, one is acting quickly, and this is really targeted towards managers on particularly low-income housing, where we see a lot of bedbug problems. Need to get onto the problem quickly, and you as a pest controller need to get onto the job quickly and be extremely thorough. And you want a thorough inspection, and you need to record the details of the inspection in a treatment plan, and you should develop a treatment plan which is then provided to the client, because I've got no doubt you'll need the client to do something. You require them to do something. You undertake integrated pest management, be it steam, heat, vacuuming. And I still think one of the best forms of pest control is vacuuming. It's amazing how quickly you can reduce the biomass of infestation with a vacuum. It's very effective. One of the most important things that you need to do, and I cannot underemphasize this, is you need to understand the limitations of product. There's no perfect product out there for bedbug control. How do I know? Well, I wouldn't be here talking to you today if there was. We've still got a bedbug problem. So you need to know not only how a product works, but more importantly, how it doesn't. And you've got to undertake post-treatment inspections, and training is so important. And there's some great training documents out there and in industry standards. So you've got the Bedbug Foundation in the US. In Australia, we've got a code of practice for the control of bedbug infestations, just recently changed its name. First developed in 2005, some 5 years before any other industry standard. There's been 9 versions of this, and it aims to promote best practice. Best practice in terms of the eradication of active bedbug infestations, and best practice in terms of the management of potential bedbug infestations through education, through promoting IPM. And it is a large document. It is a reference document, but we can develop more targeted documents to suit particular groups. And most importantly, it's completely free. So please download it. So just a couple of other references, and I do recommend this wonderful text, Advances in the Biology and Management of Modern Bedbugs. There were several British authors involved. It was the first academic book for 50, or academic text for 50 years, some 48 chapters, 60 authors, 460 pages, horribly expensive when it first came out. But if you look at some dodgy Russian websites, you may find it. Sadly, the chief editor won't get a commission if you do that. I don't mind. I'm not after the money. Another great resource for you, if you haven't come across it, is the FAETMA magazine. FAETMA is the Federation of Asian and Oceania Pest Management Association. This is the most wide website. And in the very next issue, there's one of the most detailed articles ever on the history of bedbug control. And I'm talking about some of the history in England too. I know the editor very well, it's me. So to sum up this presentation, can we blame resistance for treatment? It does help for sure, or make your job a lot harder. Now, I'm just about running out of time, and I just want to come back to something I said at the beginning. And that's about the famous Tiffin & Son, the very first pest control company in the world. What you're seeing here is an ad control company. What you're seeing here, 20. And it was the son and successor to Mrs. Tiffin. So interestingly, and you may not know this, but the very first professional pest manager in the world was a lady. Now, I must admit I was surprised by this, and perhaps it's a reflection of my sexist stereotypical upbringing, so I do apologize, ladies. And I've since found out that a lot of women had businesses around this time. It was only during the Victoria era when the number of women having businesses declined dramatically, whereas it's starting to pick up, obviously picked up in more recent years. So wouldn't it be nice if the BPCA honoured the award, perhaps the most prominent woman in the industry, with the name of the Tiffin Award? I think it'd be terrific. I hope I haven't put you on any pressure on you all, but in the meantime, I just want to thank you all. Thank Lauren Day for the kind invitation, and a great honour for the British Pest Control Association for being invited to speak to you on this auspicious day, World Pest Day. So thank you. If you've got any questions, that's my email. I'm more than happy to answer your question. Do not hesitate to ask me, to email me. So Natalie, thank you, and I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. We work very well under pressure, so I'm sure our Marcoms here might be taking note of that. But yeah, so very interesting. Your sound started to go a little bit towards the end, but can you still hear me okay?
I can hear you okay.
Fabulous, good. That's the important thing. I can't see any questions that have popped up at the moment, but I just thought, noted down a few little bits myself. I get a lot of phone calls from technicians that are struggling with bed bug issues, and obviously, talk about resistance quite a lot and the possibility of it. It's still something I think everyone's learning a bit about in the UK. So this is hopefully really particularly helpful to everyone. But for a technician,
and it's certainly not the possibility, it's probability. It's going to be the strain that if you see bed bugs, they're going to be resistant. It's so rare to find a susceptible strain. The only areas we see susceptible strain are in chicken sheds in the US. It's the only place we see them.
Okay, yeah, interesting, and that's a really key message I think to everybody listening, is that if you have that assumption of I don't have any bed bug resistant issues, I succeed all the time, then maybe it's something to think about and prepare for, like you say. But when a technician's in the field, working day to day, getting call outs left, right and centre, and of course get bed bug call outs, how best can they confirm or otherwise resistance? Do you recommend doing something before they start the work, or I don't know, what's your advice?
Well, I think basically you have to assume that they're resistant. I mean, we have never found 100% susceptible strain. We found strains that aren't very resistant. So you may remember that slide that I mentioned, that Northbridge. That was a strain that wasn't very resistant, but had some level of resistance. And remember that if you treat them, even with something like deltamethrin, there's going to be some left over that are going to be much more resistant. And this is one reason why we're probably seeing very rapid evolution of resistance. And now we're seeing resistance to the arylpyrols, to neonicotinoids, although I don't think you have neonics in Europe. So to the technician, you've got to assume you've got resistance. Now, the only chemicals that there's no resistance is really the desiccant dust. And I believe you've got silica dioxide available. Silica dioxide is probably the best product out there. Now, there are new products coming on the market. I don't know whether they'll be available. There's an active called broflanilide, which is a completely different class of insecticide. BASF's, I believe, has got the worldwide license for the professional market. We've been testing, and it's really effective against resistant strain. There's a little bit of resistance, but it's not terribly significant. Whether or not they'll come into Europe, Europe has the most strictest insecticide rules in the world. We all know that. You suffer from that, I'm sure. You have to fight that regularly. I don't know what products you have. So if you use vacuuming, steam, I like vacuuming. Steam can be a real problem in Australia. If you're working in a 35 degrees Celsius room, steam is bloody horrible, in which case I just go vacuum. We have some aerosols with organophosphate still in them. I don't believe you've got them. So with an aerosol, you can only rely on direct spray. So if you can puff silica dioxide into all those cracks and crevices after you've done a good vacuum, that is the way to go. And there are pest control companies in the UK that do just rely on things like vacuuming, steam, and the desiccant dust, and that's all they do. And they can be very successful, but it requires attention to detail, and that's the secret. And you've got to cost your job properly. And this is where a lot of pest controllers failed initially, that they really undercost themselves. And I still see pest controllers saying they'll do a bed bug job for $100. Are they going to fail? I can bet your life they're going to fail. And then not often they don't include the post-treatment inspection as part of the cost. And I actually think that's terribly immoral. To me, post-inspection is part of the job. That's my opinion. Some pest controllers will have that as an add-on. To me, I think you've already failed the client by not including it as part of the contract. But it's up to you to explain to the customer why you need to do that. I mean, there's these industry standards out there. Print one out, print the Australian one out, print out the BBF one, give it to the client, say, hey, you know, I didn't produce this. This is the world experts produce this. This is what they're saying. I'm following these documents. And, you know, I've followed these documents in the past. They've worked for me. You can go and pay for the, you know, $20 cowboy, but you'll be coming back soon. And I don't know how many times I've seen that.
No, of course.
That's reality.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is one aspect where we really need communication to the client.
Yeah. Oh, sound is kind of. Are you still there, Stephen?
I am. Yes.
Oh,
yes.
You are? Yep. It's the camera.
Oh, there is a question there. What smell do bed bugs hate? Oh, geez. I've never been asked that question. What smells do bed bugs hate? Probably a vacuum or a steamer. Not that they're smelling them. I'm not aware of anything that they hate. Certainly, if you look through the history, there were certain plants like camphor that was used to bed bugs. I mean, it's a renowned insecticide. Probably bed bugs didn't like it. Some of those very strong woods may have repelled bed bugs. But basically, everything we've tried, from tea tree oil, eucalyptus oil, does nothing.
You know, the audience here like chucking those tricky questions in there just to stump us. So no, that's great. We're just running out of time a little bit there. There's a couple of questions popped up, more statements about I know there's gassing that's used for invertebrates, sulfurfluoride, which I know some of our members use when they're authorized. That's 100% kill, but it's not available obviously to anybody. You have to have particular training for it. But yeah, they tend to be.
That's a challenge. I mean, there was some research done by Denny Miller and colleagues in the US, and the challenge is, what do you do in an apartment complex? Because you just can't use these chemicals. And in the end, it's apartment complexes and multi-unit housing where bedbug control is always going to be the most difficult. And all you can do is to take stuff off site and treat it off site. And you can do that, but it's a hell of a lot of work. But some cases, I mean, I was at a Hoarders 2 weeks ago where the pest control actually walked away from the job. And my feeling was, good on him. I mean, there's no way he was going to get control until somebody can come in this case, we probably need social workers come in to reduce the amount of his goods, or to collect everything up, bag it up and put it for fumigation, either sulfurfluoride or one of the other fumigants. I mean, I think he was the smartest pest controller I've come across for a long time, to walk away from a job. I mean, if you can't guarantee success, why do it? Why risk your own reputation? But the problem was, it was in a unit complex. So all the other units are going to be infested in the next few months again. Bed bugs will find every crack and crevice to spread in a building.
Indeed. Absolutely. Excuse me there. So yeah, thank you. We'll there's a couple of questions coming in. Can you see the Q&A section, Stephen? I think you can, can't you?
There's a lot of them. So I'm grooming behaviour in bed bug.
So Stephen, sorry,
just about yourself.
What we'll do is, if you can, we just need to get to the next speaker. But if you can type some answers to those questions that people.
Oh yes, certainly. Okay, I will.
That'd be amazing, and just have a little chat to them. That'd be great. But thank you so much for that talk. It's a really important subject. I think more pest controllers out there need to recognize that, you know, bed bug resistance is real, and make an assumption it's possibly most likely there. So thank you, Stephen, and
thank you,
hopefully you can get off and have your evening back to yourself. Thank you.